Consumer prices are up. Interest rates are rising. After about a generation, global inflation is surging again. Why have millions of people around the world become exposed to high inflation? And what can we do to bring it back under control?
Henry, I'm going to start with you. What is inflation?
Inflation is a rise in prices. It's a rise in average prices measured by a basket of goods and services. Typically, it's when everything gets expensive. And when you think about that, it's important to realize it's not when just one thing gets more expensive. That's what we'd call a change in relative prices. It's a change in overall prices.
Why do economists get so exercised about it? What happens if we just let inflation kind of do its thing? Why do we care?
If inflation starts creeping up, and I think that that's going to last, then I might start pushing up, the wage increase that I would like, or the prices that I would like to set. And so what you end up having is a situation where prices start creeping up higher and higher and higher. And we know from places where inflation is really high that has a cost.
My own view is that it's really more like an on-off switch. Either inflation is low enough that people don't really have to worry about it too much, or it's high enough that they pay a lot of attention because they're feeling it every time they buy anything, and they have to budget more carefully and all the things that are going on right now. And then it really shoots up the scales in terms of its political importance.
What are the levers that policymakers have to make inflation go up or down?
Well, there's been a consensus for about 3 decades or so that the primary responsibility for controlling inflation is the responsibility of the central bank, and that the way in which you control inflation is by raising interest rates when inflation is too high, which reduces the amount of spending in the economy, reduces the amount of money chasing a limited pool of goods and services, which is ultimately what causes people to put their prices up. At the moment, with inflation too high, the real question is, how high are central banks going to raise interest rates in order to fight it?
The next section we're going to is what we're going to do about inflation. Now, obviously, at the moment, central banks are raising rates pretty rapidly. Is this going to cause inflation to come down fairly quickly, as the central banks hope?
I mean, that's the question of the day, really, is how effective central banks are going to be in bringing down inflation. The pace of the monetary tightening is pretty steep. It's the steepest in America since the early 1980s. So after a period of hesitation, it looks like they're taking the problem seriously. The real question now is how much pain that's going to cause, I think.
There's a sort of dirty little secret of monetary economics, and that's that the actual mechanisms by which higher interest rates flow through the economy aren't that well understood. It wouldn't surprise me if they still have to go significantly higher, but I have complete faith in the ability of higher interest rates to bring down inflation ultimately, because if you raise rates high enough, it will, as Rachna has said, cause a recession eventually, and that's very effective at bringing inflation down.
If you're a policymaker now, what else are you or should you be thinking about doing to get inflation expectations down?
To the extent that inflation is about the balance between demand and supply in the economy, other policies that reduce aggregate demand would bring inflation down as well. And there, tighter fiscal policy, raising taxes, reducing spending would bring down prices as well. What we're being reminded of right now is just how unpopular inflation is, how much people dislike prices at the pump going up, the feeling that when they go to supermarkets they can afford less and less, and that has political consequences and can drive politicians and governments to try to do things to rein in price rises.
The proof is in the pudding. Central banks have to deliver the low inflation, and then people will believe that inflation is going to be low.
Thanks for watching. To read The Economist coverage of inflation, click on the link and don't forget to subscribe.